We've had a multitude of issues with the Mauritian economy even before COVID crisis. So the multitude issues have been a decline in our exports that's been going on for the last 10 years, despite the fact that the local currency has been depreciated, an increase in our imports, which obviously eats a lot of foreign currency. So we need to ask ourselves a fundamental question: why have we not been able to attract far more investment into Mauritius even before the COVID crisis? And now during this COVID crisis, things are getting even tougher for a number of reasons, because we are on the grey blacklist. So currently in 2021, Mauritius is in a very difficult economic situation. We've seen for the last 15 months since the start of the COVID crisis, Mauritius has struggled economically with the biggest contraction of 15% of its GDP in 2020. It's one of the worst contraction in the world. And then when it comes to recovery, I believe it's going to be a slow recovery. So it's going to take more than 3 to 4 or 5 years to recover, to be back where we were in 2019. But I think more importantly is, in this changing world, and we're seeing what's happening today, is how Mauritius is going to position itself economically in this global world to come out stronger. So I think my concern is about how do we recover stronger as opposed to a slow recovery. Having said that, we've had a multitude of issues with the Mauritian economy even before COVID crisis. So the multitude issues have been a decline in our exports that's been going on for the last 10 years, despite the fact that the local currency has been depreciated, an increase in our imports, which obviously eats a lot of foreign currency. You know, we've seen the struggle of our tourism sector pre-2020. We've seen the fact that we are currently on the grey list and the blacklist, which obviously is a big issue for the financial services sector. And then we haven't seen any new economic pillars that we've talked about for many, many years taken off. So these economic pillars are the blue, the silver economy. We haven't seen these coming out of ground as such. So I think now is the time to really push for all these to come up with a new economic agenda. This is a very interesting question. Why? Because if you look even before COVID crisis, you would see from a foreign direct investment perspective, we've pretty much stagnated around $500 million for the last 10 years, pretty much around that number, okay? The only thing that's been happening is because the Mauritian rupee has been depreciated over the last 5-6 years. If you remember back, pre-2015 or pre-2014, the rupee to the dollar was around 30, and then eventually the rupee depreciated to 35, and then it went down to 37 before the COVID crisis, and now sitting at 41 to the dollar during this COVID crisis. So you would see that, there's an illusion of an increase of FDI in Mauritian rupee, but that's only to do with depreciation of the currency. But then when you look at the bottom line is US dollar investment, euro investment, has been pretty stable for the last 10 years. So we need to ask ourselves a fundamental question: why have we not been able to attract far more investment into Mauritius even before the COVID crisis? And now during this COVID crisis, things are getting even tougher for a number of reasons, because we are on the grey blacklist. So that's an impediment for foreigners to invest in Mauritius. And then secondly, which is even more important for me, is our competitors are not sleeping. So Mauritius has got a number of competitors. We've seen what's been happening in Rwanda lately, clearly positioning itself as a financial hub, as a tech hub. We are seeing what's happening in Dubai. Dubai, obviously, almighty Dubai was already strong in terms of positioning, but even now today, it's really positioning itself as a hub for African business, for investors to invest in Africa. So for me, there's a big question mark. I think personally, I've known Mauritius for many years. I talk to a lot of investors globally. I think we've lost the flavor. And I think that's very important for this new budget to focus on, is how do we reposition Mauritius in the international arena? Well, if you look at FDI coming into the country, because don't forget, a lot of investment pass through Mauritius. They don't sit in Mauritius as such. So you've got money from the UK, from Europe, from Asia, that transit via Mauritius that would end up into India or Africa or other parts of the world. That's just transitional flows, yeah? Okay. But if you look at real foreign direct investment, investors who've invested in Mauritius, in projects in Mauritius, the bulk of FDI has been, for the last 10 years, around 60% plus has been in real estate. And we've seen it, yeah? I mean, since the enactment of the IRS scheme in 2003, the first project coming out, I think around 2006 or 7, Mauritius has sold around 3,000 plus residential units to foreigners. It's around 200 units, 300 units per year, basically. So if you track those numbers, you'll see the bulk of the FDI has been predominantly in property, i.e. buying residential units in Mauritius. So that should have already told us many years ago that we've got a fundamental problem in attracting FDI into the new sectors, like, the blue economy, the silver economy, all those things that we've been wishing to get on with. Well, big question. I think we need to be frank with ourselves. I always believe, past successes doesn't mean, they don't mean that you're going to succeed in the future. If you remember, I think post 2005, Mauritius came up in the international arena from a fiscal point of view, because back in 2005-ish, I think we came up with a 15% tax on income tax, on corporate tax, on VAT. So it was a very straightforward, simplified fiscal regime. And that has been a interesting, unique selling proposition for Mauritius. And that's the reason why foreigners have been talking about Mauritius, because of fiscal reasons. Right now, I'm not convinced, because we've got a fiscality which is a bit blurred over the last couple of years. Secondly, because we are on the grey blacklist, and obviously people know about it overseas. And then thirdly, because we fundamentally haven't come up with attractive schemes to really reposition and attract investors into Mauritius, into those new sectors. So my take is, because I do rub shoulders with a lot of investors globally, is Mauritius needs a deep transformation to reposition itself as an investment destination. And I think it's urgent that needs to be done, basically. And we need to take cognizance that Mauritius has got far more competitors these days than they had probably 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. The competitors are coming up aggressively. They're taking market share. And we need to understand that, we need to reposition Mauritius, or else we're going to be on the decline. And I hope we do the right stuff. And I hope this budget is going to come up with a new, strong vision, new incentives that would reposition Mauritius in the international arena. For me, it's a make or break budget. Status quo would lead us to the break, which I hope not. I think for me, there are always opportunities. Tourism will pick up. I can see what's happening in Seychelles, what's happening in Maldives. Other sectors will pick up as well. But we need to reposition Mauritius in the international arena to make it an attractive destination. So I wish for a budget that simplifies our fiscal regime. My advice to the minister would have gone for a big bang approach to basically just go for a 5 to 10% income tax, corporate tax, come up with a 2-tier VAT rate, a lower VAT rate for the low and middle income people at 10%, and a slightly higher VAT rate for products and services that are normally targeted towards higher income people, So for me, fiscality is number one. And then number two is I would wish for the government, for the minister, to put resources to reinvent or to restructure the EDB, because we need a very aggressive, a very proactive institution that can capture investment flows. There are lots of investors there, and we are missing opportunities. So it's up to us to grasp these opportunities. And to be able to do that, I wish the minister is going to put a lot of emphasis on human capital, because that's the only resource that's going to be able to reposition Mauritius and come up with a new vision, and more importantly, to execute a proper action plan.